Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you are a first-time listener, glad to have you along for the ride. Thank you. And guess what? I am not bashful. I will beg. I'm a well-dressed beggar. In fact, I have a caller on today. So if you like what we're doing out there, please give us a good rating. Give us that 5-star. We like those because it helps us in the podcast placement in the marketplaces. If you're a returning listener, thank you very much. Glad to have you on board with us. Thanks to you and, of course, our great guests. We have cracked into the top 10 fastest growing podcasts in the marketplace out there. And that's great because there's millions of choices for literally millions of choices for podcasts. So thank you very much for coming along. We've been very blessed. If you don't like the podcast distribution point you're on today, don't worry, there's 23 of them. You can find us anywhere. And you can always go to the show website at rexandrewsshow.com. And the reason why I want you to go there is a couple things. Number one, we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things today with our guests, but we don't have all the time to cover everything. So on the show site, you're going to find information about our guests, their biographies, links to their businesses, all that kind of stuff, because the people I interview are the people you want to be in touch with. So please stop by the show. We're on all social media platforms that I can think of, even some you may not have even heard of. And thanks to all of this fun stuff, we are currently in 32 countries on 6 continents. And if I could afford to buy all the Penguin smartphones, we'd probably have them listening too. All right. So today I got another great story for you. You know, the show is all about human stories, human experiences. My problem is, and it could be others too, is I have too many interests for just one lifetime. And my biggest problem is around every corner, there's another discovery. Well, I've got another discovery for you today. A great individual. I can't wait to introduce you to her and have her share her story and what she's doing. But let me give you a few of her things that she's been doing a lot of stuff on. She's a keynote speaker and known internationally for that. And it gets in front of people on a regular basis. She's an author, a published author. She is a psychotherapist, and she, not only being a practicing psychotherapist, it focuses a lot on grief, trauma, sexual issues, and those types of things, but she actually writes for Psychology Today and other various publications. She helps a lot of people look at and focus on their losses in their lives and how to turn those into something that isn't just a big downer session. You know, nobody wants to wear a big wet blanket for all day. So I'm excited to talk to her today and introduce you to Edy Nathan. Edy, how are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
It's a great day, you know, I'm still vertical and got a lot of things to do. So every day that I'm still breathing, I count it as a good day. Here we are, hopefully coming out of the end of the pandemic. We're recording this in mid-April. And based on the last year and few months, hey, I'm just happy to be where we are, and it's been an interesting ride. So there's lots to talk about that. So, but before we get started here today, Edy, if you could you toss out a website where people can find you so that those who might be following along can, and then we'll come back and talk about that stuff a little later.
Sure. So the best way to get me is to edynathan.com. And Edy is spelled E-D-Y and Nathan is Nathan.com.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, Edy, if you've heard, and I know you've listened into a couple of the shows as we were talking offline before we got started here today, we like to go back and figure out, you know, what rocks did you hop across to get to the creek where you are today? So we want to know these things, and it's a long list, but don't worry, I'll remind you if you forget them. We want to know where you were born, okay, and then where you grew up. Those are not always the same. I had one guest who actually moved 63 times before she was 15. So there's some influences that can happen where we grow up. The things that you did as a youth and a child, so interests, things you played, sports or music or dance or computers, or heck, even if it's shoplifting, it doesn't matter. We want to know, okay, what were some of those influences? Then I want to know about your family life. Do you have siblings? Did you have siblings that actually survived your harassment? Did you have parents that were really involved in your upbringing, or were they just working their tail off? What type of work did your parents do? Okay, so I swear this isn't a therapy session. It's just helping us understand who you are. But, you know, the type of work and the influence our parents have on our lives are huge formative things, because sometimes they're great for support and sometimes they act as fulcrums of motivation to do something different because we're getting away from something. So you can go to any level you want. The conversation is about learning your story and helping us understand what you're doing today. So Edy, if you could, where were you born?
I was born on the south side of Chicago in Illinois.
South side of Chicago. I lived in great Chicagoland for a couple of years. You know, it's cold for no apparent reason at all in Chicago. It's just
It is cold there.
Okay. Now, did you grow up there in the south side of Chicago?
So we were on the south side of Chicago for about 7 years, and then we moved to the burbs on the northern suburbs, and we moved to Highland Park. That's where I went to, I don't know, I was there from second grade on until my freshman year of high school. And then I went away to school and went to a wonderful school in Michigan called Interlochen Arts Academy. And that's in Interlochen, Michigan, near Traverse City. And there's a lot of lake effect up there. It's freezing up there.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were heading in the direction of arts. What did you do with your spare time growing up?
I loved theater. I loved art. Theater was the way that I survived, I think. So it was a lot easier to get into other characters than maybe living the life that, was about me.
Okay.
So I put myself solely into theater. And it probably saved me in many ways, and it gave me a group of people to be with that were safe enough. And it enabled me to find my own flow and fluidity.
Okay. How about siblings? Did you have siblings?
I have a younger brother. He's 22 months younger than I am. He's still in Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
He's married. He's got 3 kids. And I just adore my brother, my sister-in-law, and my nieces and nephew. Yeah.
Well, great. It sounds like you had a decent relationship with them. So tell us about your father a little bit. What type of work was your father doing when you were?
So if you ask my dad what kind of work he did, he'd tell you he was a professional gambler. But the reality, that's right. That's what he'd say. But the reality is that he was actually a grains trader at the Board of Trade in Chicago, and he traded soybeans. And he'd come home at 1:30 in the afternoon after having been on the floor of the Board of Trade, and he'd have like literally black and blue marks all over him because the men, and it was only men at the time, in the pits would kick, and it was just the way things were. Yeah.
Oh my, that's cool. Actually, I kind of thought on the professional gambler, that might sound like my career. I've gambled on a lot of things. That's great. So was this the majority of his career when you were growing up?
Yeah, he was smart, and he was an accountant as well, a CPA, but he was also always looking for the next deal. He was really a bit of the gambler and looking for the next best thing, and did very well, retired at 50. However, he never really felt he made it, and that's a shame. And he really made it, but his idea of making it was that he would make enough money so that his children would never have to work.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great ambition, but that's not a good reality.
No. But that was his thing. So he was always looking for the next best deal, and he was always ahead of the curve. And it's just too bad, but he was an innovator for sure.
Fantastic. And then how about your mom?
Oh, my mom was funny and beautiful. She had been a runway model, and she also she was a sewer. She made like dresses for myself and for her, and she taught me how to sew.
Oh, wow.
And she was really a designer, though. She just loved designing things. So yeah.
How fun.
Yeah.
So looking back, how would you kind of describe your family experience? It was fairly typical. It sounded like your dad was very successful. The fact that he retired at 50, goodness gracious, that's making it. And the fact that he landed a runway model, that's making it too. So I don't know what he's talking about, but
right.
Yeah. So how would you describe looking back at your, your youth and growing up?
So, you know, I am very thankful for how I grew up,
Uh-huh.
in that it was a hard life. I was an outlier. I was really a kind of an outlier within my own family. I was teased. I was fat. I was everything that made life a little bit harder. And yet it 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 has informed so much of my work that if I had ever really decided to follow through in the theater, I always thought of that speech that I would make, and it would be, thanks for all the cruelty, because that cruelty gave me a skin that I never thought I would have, and I am now able to really help people because of that skin.
That's great. So you went off to boarding school, is that right?
Well, boarding school, you could say that, but boarding school sounds so pejorative, and it wasn't pejorative.
Okay. Well,
Although,
but how old were you? I guess that's what I'm trying to get
so
to.
I was what, 14 and a half when I went, but
Okay,
I
so
wanted
I'm
to
sorry,
go.
but I'm sorry, Edie, that's still boarding school. You're a kid. You can change the descriptor all you want. You're still a kid at that time. 14 and a half. Oh, you just made it sound like you moved to Manhattan at age 25. No, you were not exactly on your own up there in Michigan. So
No, but you know what? It was the best program. It was so amazing,
mhm.
because the arts were just all around you, from pottery to theater. I was there for theater to, it's known for their music camp, but music, and, you'd hear music wafting from the auditorium as you were rehearsing a play. And it was an amazing, amazing program. And they could teach a lot of people about how to educate kids. It was a whole
Oh,
different, we were off schedule
yeah.
in terms of the way that we learned. So,
I look back at my education, whether it was formal or not, I'm not even sure, but I think we far undervalue and put into place experience learning. It
yeah.
is it is I sit here at age 55 and I'm not even sure I can remember any item of information that was shared to me while I was in high school, and probably even two-thirds of college. But
Mm-mm.
I can sure remember all the learning things I did along the way.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's
that's
true.
interesting. And so
Yeah.
wow. So how many years were you up there in Michigan?
So I was up there for about 2 years, and then when I realized that if I took all of the credits that I currently had and went back to Highland Park, I could get out of high school early. So I left Michigan, I went back to Highland Park, and I got out of high school, and then was New York bound. I went to NYU, and yeah, absolutely, always knew I wanted to be in New York, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, so
Yeah, that's great. So what you landed in NYU about what, 17?
I was 18. I took a year off
Okay.
to that weight that I was telling you about. So
Mm-hmm.
so I stopped in North Carolina to go to a fat program so I could lose some weight and get my health together, because I was dying.
Yeah.
I was dying, and I needed to not be dying. And
Yeah.
so, they had North Carolina, Durham. The Durham area is actually very well known to help. They've got some wonderful programs for people who are ill as a result of being overweight.
Sure.
And so they really helped me just kind of understand food and psychology and hunger. And so then after that, I went to New York, and
Okay.
yeah.
That's pretty bold. Now, the way you were raised, was that seen that was a bold move, or was that just sort of expected behavior? I mean, for a young lady to go off to New York, okay? New York, okay, there's a Manhattan in Kansas, but it isn't like Manhattan in New York, right?
Right.
And if you go to, was it Kansas? Yeah, Kansas State that's in Manhattan, that's a different experience than
It is a
being
different experience.
NYU, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many 18 or 19-year-olds or whatever year you stepped in there can handle, New York, okay? You got to be a pretty thick-skinned person, pretty tough, pretty resilient, because hey, I could surely drop you off in Manhattan, Kansas, and it's just not going to be the same experience. Okay.
It's true. Rex, you and I were talking before we started taping here, and you're a very creative person, right?
Yes.
And Chicago's filled with creative people and
Oh,
artists, but sometimes when a place holds certain memories, you got to get out
yep.
and create your own new history. And what
Sure.
New York did for me is that it helped me to create a new history. And I tell a joke. It's funny and it's not funny, but when I was walking through Central Park and I saw a guy talking to a bush, and I had no inclination to talk to that bush, I knew I was in the right place, because I knew that I could expand, I could really spread my wings, and I could be odd and weird, and it didn't matter because it wasn't going to be outstanding.
No, in New York you can be as weird as you want. You're going to be
That's
just
right.
part of the normal crowd.
Yeah.
So
And I can sometimes be very outspoken, and I say what's on my mind, and that's not always the greatest thing in the world.
sure.
But in New York, you could do that or not.
Yeah. I remember I grew up in the West, and I've lived in 7 states, but moved back to Colorado, but grew up in the West. And so we didn't really have big cities. I grew outside of Denver, and just wasn't used to the big cities and just the aggressiveness of the East Coast culture. So I took a job up there. I was based in Shelton, Connecticut. So that's an easy train ride from New Haven down into the city. And I was calling on the really big banks and stuff. And I can remember the first time, and it was like my first exposure to New York City. And I can remember going into these meetings, and we're on the 18th floor of the Citibank building there over Long Island and City. They had just got that tower up and all that stuff. So this is a while back. And we went into these meetings, and I thought I went into a combat zone. Every sentence was dropped with an F-bomb, and these people were pointing at each other and yelling at each other and all this type of stuff. And I walked out of the meeting with my meeting sponsor, our customer sponsor there, because I was a software vendor. I'm like, why was that such a contentious meeting? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what is that? I just explained. So I just went on that whole thing. He goes, oh, that's just nothing. That's a normal day at the office. So from there, I hopscotched in and started to learn the city and stuff. And well, I mean, coming from Cowtown, Denver, where people weren't in people's faces, and if you were that aggressive or using that kind of language and stuff, people would think you're from another planet. But that was just New York. That was just how it rolled.
Yeah.
And these people were all dressed in suits. That was the part that I laughed at. Is we weren't Vinny and his brother Tony on the sidewalk, arguing over car parts or something. We were in corporate America, middle of a tower, Citibank assets, global things, $30 million projects, and they were all just in each other's face like it was a weekend at Vinny's. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a certain energy for sure, and you just don't take it personally.
No. After you get past that initial shock, yeah, okay, I got it. And I tried to fit in, but it just wasn't me. It was, it was more of a, wow, this is certainly a people watching experience. Okay. So when you got to New York, and I'm sorry for me going down that rabbit hole there for a minute. When you got to New York, after you've been there for 3-6 months, did you ever have a feeling of, holy cow, what did I get myself into?
No, never.
Okay. So you were in the right place, the right time, right everything.
Yeah, I can remember walking. I was taking an acting class on 42nd Street, and 42nd Street at that time was not the most savory of places. I mean, there were prostitutes, there were drug addicts, and and I was taking acting classes at NYU, and my acting class started at 9 p.m. on 42nd Street and 11th Avenue, which was really a horrible place. And, it's not like you could get a taxi or anything.
No.
And nor could I really afford it. And I remember that the way that I would walk home at midnight, and there was usually a group of us, but, I'd recite Shakespeare, and I figured as long as I looked crazy and I was reciting something and I was talking out loud, no one would bother me. And so you just kind of had to, kind of trump the craziness. Yeah. And again, they're all life lessons, right? It's how are you going to hold on to yourself? How are you going to be a witness to how you honor your own sense of safety and what safety is to you. And, and how do you, maybe walk with less fear, but more awakeness and awareness and presence. And those were big lessons.
That's great. So what did you study at the NYU?
I studied theater and sociology and drama therapy. And
surprise, huh?
Surprise. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And drama therapy is wonderful. It was a wonderful precursor actually to my second master's, which was in social work, because drama therapy really got into the depths of our story. And stories are just so essential to the psyche and to how we carry pain and how we carry joy and our families and our family stories and our family histories and how we're going to project and how we carry the wounds and the lessons of our ancestors.
Wow. So drama therapy, help me out there a little bit here.
Sure.
Because I'm a computer guy. I mean, I'm X's and O's, and it's black and white, and it's pretty abstract things. It's if X does this plus Y, it equals the Z, right? So what all is involved in drama therapy? I mean, without starting another whole show here, okay?
We're starting a whole show. So in a nutshell, imagine all of the things that go into the drama of our lives. Do we wear masks? Sure we do. Mm-hmm. Do we tell stories? Sure we do. Do we maybe with children, or as we are growing up, do we play games? Sure we do. Do we act out? Sure we do. And so drama therapy is taking all of those different aspects of our development from a creative point of view, and then bringing the psychology into it. So bringing in ritual, bringing in storytelling, bringing in role play, masks, puppetry, as a way to get into that which we hold deeply within us. And it's a way to unmask, but in ways that we can't be tricky around those things. So for example, if I ask somebody to take a mask that maybe is already pre-made and just start to write words on that mask, the words that come out, maybe I ask them to write words about grief or loss. What they write on that mask is then a projection, and that projection then becomes safe in how they might talk about what's going on. If I ask them to just talk about it, they may respond monosyllabically, they may go quiet, they may tell me a story that they've told a gazillion times before that hurts, but they don't really associate any pain to it. But boy, you put it onto the mask and then you ask them to tell you one story about that word anger. And before you know it, they're telling you a story that they didn't think they were going to tell you, and it opens up a whole world.
Okay. The first thought that comes to my mind is The Shining.
Yeah.
Is The Shining.
Oh, okay.
Red rum, my mask, right? And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go there, but
no, it's good.
So with drama therapy, okay, and again, we'll move on to other things because we've got lots of other things to talk about. With drama therapy, does someone go to somebody and say, okay, I'm looking for a drama therapist to help me get through my whatever,
So there, you know what? Actually, there are licensed drama therapists, and the program that I was in at NYU was like one of 3 programs in the whole United States, maybe even the world. Wow. And it was headed up by Robert Landy, and he's a master at this. And the integration of then psychodrama, which is true role play, and the depths of role play and the depths of taking on, kind of alters or having different people represent part of your story allows for a true breakdown of what is going on within your personal world. Right. And when you can see and talk to even people you've lost. I use a lot of psychodrama in my work, empty chair, which is Gestalt work, and also psychodrama and drama therapy. Like, let's put your grief in the chair and let's talk to grief. Oh, well, you have anger and grief. Let's create another chair or another person in the room in a group therapy setting, and they can represent your anger. And then let's have somebody represent your anxiety. And then, as the protagonist, because that's who you are as the client, the protagonist, you start to actually have these different conversations, and what you've been holding inside and has been so kind of precious and sacrosanct, and you've had to protect so with such audacity because it's so big, and then you start to lay them out, then it stops being so big, and then you can actually have an interaction that is pure and real, and yes, projective, but it begins to relieve the brain of the way that it's holding the grief or the trauma or the loss.
Okay, that makes sense. The best classes I've ever taken for myself, as far as just the whole dealing with emotions and stress and those things, and I took some mindfulness classes,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting to watch the people, because a lot of these people were in there because it was parts of programs. I wasn't. I volunteered for the thing. Some of them were there because they were in some sort of legal problems or those types of things or other care. And I found it to be really interesting because I slowed down and I stopped and I connected with things that I just didn't connect with before. So I can see all of the long monologue you just went through as far as explaining how that works. How you could release that thing, because in the mind of someone who might have those traumas locked up, that might be a very soothing and easy way for them to let those things out. Is that a fair assessment?
So I wouldn't call it soothing. Illuminating, yes.
Okay.
The work in some ways is much more intense because we often use words to guard ourselves and actually to keep things away. So this is kind of a way to go beyond how we have masked ourselves.
Okay.
And so it's an opening. And just like mindfulness can be an opening, right? You walk into something through your mind and the gates open so you can begin to see things that have otherwise been foggy. And now is a time of great illumination. It is a time to see beyond the trauma.
Wow, you might be the most intense interviewee I've had on the show. This is great. So now, did you finish those degrees sequentially right there, or did you go off and work for a while and come back on your second one? Help me understand a little bit of that.
So yes and yes.
Okay.
So and I just want to say something about I may be the most impassioned. I feel great passion around this because because it works.
Yeah.
Because I've seen people heal, and there's nothing worse than walking around with that kind of trauma and pain and have nowhere to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
It is the true hero's journey. And so I just want to say that it is an unimaginable place to be in when you feel so stuck and so trapped by emotions, by shame, by regret, that you can't even feel like you can explore relationships or sexuality or desire or yearning. And so, I am impassioned because I've been through it, and because I've watched people evolve and shift and change. So to that point, I am a forever learner. I get the sense you are too.
Yep.
And so yeah, I graduated from NYU, and I got my undergraduate degree through Gallatin, which was an amazing experience, and then the drama therapy program along with sociology. So I kind of had two majors because I saw that that drama and sociology had a kinship. Sociology is the study of people within their environments, right? And drama therapy is the study of truly the psyche and the drama of the psyche. So they really did merge together, and I use them really, they dance together. I then went, I did work for a while, but while I was working, I then became a psychodramatist and that was like a specialty, and then went back to school because I realized that the way that our world worked, that I had to have a legitimate degree, because drama therapy, like your reaction, what's drama therapy?
Right.
I couldn't find a way, and there were people who did, but I couldn't find a way to do what I wanted to do and legitimize and be out there in the world in the way that I wanted to be out in the world. So I went back to school, I went to Fordham, I got my degree in social work, and then, you know, began to carve out what this was going to all look like. And yeah.
Nice. You know, I was just sitting here listening to you and taking this in, and you're really blessed, because I think about, you know, my kids are on the verge of starting their careers and stuff. My son-in-law is just finished his master's in finance and stuff, and I just kind of think to myself, and even looking back in my career, you know, high tech and stuff, I wasn't as impassionate about it as you are. How blessed you are to be able to find something that you wanted to do, that you believed in, and it was such a thing. Because, you know, I'm sorry, but double entry accounting, I just don't think I could get all that, you know, jazzed up about that, right? So no, it's really a blessing, and I can tell by the way you approach this that you have lived a blessed life because of this, because you're in it, you're deep in it, and not everybody can say that, because I don't know what the statistics are, but so many people walking around hating what they do, and I can't even imagine that kind of existence. So did you go into private practice once you finished, or what did your pay the bills side of the world look like after you finished your degrees?
So while I was going to school, I started I started a business called Made for You, and it was a group of friends. As a way of just kind of bringing in some money, we actually had a maid service, and we had a catering business, and we'd go in and we'd clean your house, and then we'd cater a party, and we just did that, and it was a blast. I say that because it was like kind of being, you know, utilizing all the skills. And I guess that's really what I'm talking about here is,
Sure.
is that we don't just have one set of skills. We as human beings have a plethora of skills. It's just what we tell ourselves. And if we tell ourselves that we're limited, or if what we have been told is that we are limited, then we may choose that path. I was told you can do whatever you want, and you can be whoever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that. And so I really do believe I can be whatever I want. And so I put myself into different situations. And with that said, I started work at Beth Israel Hospital, and I was in the middle of the AIDS crisis, and I ended up being the inpatient care coordinator for a program that was meant for a nurse. But because I was so impassioned with what I did, they basically trained me to work on the inpatient side and work with these men and women who were taking methadone and were dying of AIDS.
Oh, wow.
And I worked there. I did grand rounds on grief and burnout for staff, for doctors, and I did exactly what we're talking about. I mean, I had doctors get up and, you know, give me 6 words that represented their burnout. And I told them I didn't want to hear any more than 6 words. And they were like, what? And it was like, how do you make a shortcut to that? And so being able to be within that environment was amazing. And then I worked at St. Clair's, and I headed up the only HIV positive methadone program in the United States. And I was there for a short time. And I'm not going to tell you the story why I got fired, but I got fired, and it was a blessing. And from there, I started a private practice. And my then husband basically said to me, you have 6 months. And if you don't have a practice in 6 months, you have to go back and find a job. And I did guerrilla marketing. I called up churches and Ys and synagogues, and I said, I can lead a group, and this is the group I can lead. And I've never looked back.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now, let's talk about some of the stuff, or, fast forward a little bit and come back to this. Some of the stuff that you're doing today. Tell me about the stuff you've written, maybe some of your new stuff with the Pivot Quest. And because I want to kind of like then look back in the history books here with you and see how this all glued together. So what comes to mind? You want to talk about what you've written, or you're speaking a little bit, or
Sure. So I do, of course, I'm not going to just get up there and speak. I like to have interactive
Sure.
kind of speaking experience. So when somebody comes in, when we had people in the audience, they might come in, and underneath their seats, they might find something. And at some point in my speech, I might ask them to go under their chair and get it. And it might actually just be a piece of clay.
Okay.
And the idea of the clay is that we are moldable, and
Mm-hmm.
clay can look and feel like so many different things, and it can get hard, and it can break, and it can be soft, and it can be malleable. And I talk a lot about burnout and grief and loss, and how we get stuck within that cycle of
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that we're burned out, and what the signs are for burnout. In speaking to physicians and nurses and support staff around burnout, really, and their grief, there's a lot of hiding that goes on within the field of medicine. And that hiding is, I don't want to be found out that I'm in pain or I'm hurting. And it's unfortunate, because statistically the suicide rates are very high among doctors, especially around surgeons and orthopedic surgeons, as a matter of fact, and
Yeah.
nurses. It's also high, and support staff as well, because they're not getting the help that they need. And it's truly unfortunate. And I'm an advocate for the mental health of these professionals, because they go through medical school, or they go through their nursing schools or their PA schools, and they're basically taught how not to see and how not to
Mm-hmm.
feel, so that they can be good clinicians. And yet it is
Right.
the very thing, that the very heart that probably led them into the field to begin with, that is asked to be cut out. And so how do you get them back in touch with their hearts? And I write about this, and I talk about this. And then and so the big umbrella about grief is learning how to pivot and how to get in touch with the superpowers. And I kind of look at very quickly, like a paradigm of, where are you stuck? Where can you identify your unexpected allies? And I see grief as an unexpected ally, because it forces us to pivot. And then where is the metamorphosis? Where is the growth? And so the three pieces are stuck, unexpected ally / superpower, and then metamorphosis, growth. And really trying to break these three pieces up and say, okay, I'm stuck, but that doesn't mean it has to be forever. And that we are always in a process of perhaps meeting unexpected allies, and those unexpected allies might be our brains. I
Sure.
superheroes like Superman and Thor and Catwoman. Well, you know what? Guess what? They had one, maybe two superpowers, but we as humans, we've got many more than just a few. And it can be finding calm in chaos, or finding our patience. And those are all superpowers, but we don't label them as such. And when we work with kids, and I love working with teenagers, I just actually had an article on scipro.com for professionals, social workers and doctors, first line staff. How do you deal with a teen right now who might be suicidal? Because the suicide desire and hunger and yearning in teens right now, you and I were talking about your daughter, and how, what her last year of high school has been. And some teens aren't dealing well with this,
Yeah.
and they only see a way out to end their lives. And it's just so sad. And so again, it's like, what do you do? Well, you really help them feel like they're being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we are not touched, as babies, we fail to thrive. As teens, we fail to thrive. And as adults, we fail to thrive. When you feel very alone in a process like burnout, like grief, you fail to thrive. And this is about finding a language. How do you find a language? I never, in what I write, my book, It's Grief, the Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I have that title is because it is about the self-discovery, this process of the, let's look about who you are. Let's hear about how you got here. And I will never ask for someone's story the first time I meet them. I want to know what they're yearning for. I want to know the story of the life they'd like to have.
Dang, I broke all those rules. First time I meet you, all I do is ask you questions about your story. How funny. Now, you specialize a lot in grief and helping people get through that. And I don't know if the right word is embracing it or
I
championing.
say dancing.
Dancing, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Dancing
To
with
partner
it.
with it.
Well, that's kind of good because then sometimes you might fall over and sometimes you might step on toes and stuff. So yeah, partnering with it. I get it. Okay. But you also talk in some of your biography and some of the reasons we reached out to get you on the show, sort of the opposite side of some of this stuff, and that would be the intimacy and sex and things like that. So is there a bridge between all this, or is that just a whole nother topic that you help people with?
So what's been interesting is that one piece of my grief work started to inform the work of sexual grief.
Okay.
And because so often when a couple is grieving the loss of a child,
Okay.
or when a woman is grieving, as she goes through menopause, or because I look at the losses in life as the grief that we deal with, so that grief is not just about the loss of a loved one. I mean, and that's huge. Grief is also about the big G's and the little G's. The big G's, the loss of a job sometimes can be a big G kind of grief, or the loss of a limb, or the loss of independence because of a medical issue, or actually for a woman, she reaches menopause and then her sex drive has just completely been cut off. Or
Sure.
for a man, all of a sudden he's suffering from, an inability to function sexually the way he used to.
Right.
And these are griefs that no one wants to talk about. And what I want to do is bring into the conversation, let's talk about what you don't want to talk about, not what's so easy necessarily to talk about. And so the sexual piece, again, what's the driver? So I then became a certified sex therapist and talk about grief and sexuality, because we don't talk about it, because those are the things those are the topics that are hidden. And when we hide, those issues often become bigger. When we don't talk about with our partners or with our loved ones, I'm afraid. I feel afraid to tell you that I'm not feeling the sexual drive that I used to feel. And it doesn't mean I don't love you, but I don't know what to do about it. And I felt embarrassed. Or I wasn't able to perform the way that I used to be able to perform. And I know you know it, and I know it, but we're not talking about it. And that schism in the relationship begins, and it begins ever so slowly. And I work a lot with couples and to help them talk about what they haven't been talking about.
Normal to have those types of, I guess I never really thought of sexual issues to be associated with the grief around them. Maybe I'm just too young. I don't know, but it's interesting you talk about that, because I never really thought, in my mind, I don't equate sex with trauma. Okay, I just don't. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the other way around. My mind's, thinking about this is woo-wooville, not, Traumaville, and
Yeah,
causing me stress.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. But of course, if you can't do those things, or you don't have your drive, or those types of things, yeah, I can imagine that the stress would be enormous.
And that's the easy trauma. the sexual trauma of having been sexually abused, emotionally abused, even if you've been have not been sexually abused, but emotionally abused, it affects you sexually. It can affect drive, and it can affect the driver within you. And so, the people who come in, I am a sexual abuse survivor, and I wish that I could have spoken about it, and I didn't, and I hid it. I was very young. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my dad. It was something that happened outside, and certainly it affected me, and that is. And did it cause a certain grief? Absolutely. Do I think that that is the reason my weight went on me? You bet.
Okay.
And when my weight began to come off, I mean, the grief conversation is massive, because that weight protected me, and you can't get near me, and you won't want me, and you won't think that I am pretty. You're not going to think I'm desirable. That was I needed that. I needed that, because otherwise everything felt way, way, way too dangerous, way, way, way too dangerous. And so, what I want people to think is that when they see someone who may struggle with weight, don't think, oh, well, they can't control their food. Think about what they're protecting.
Right.
Think about how they're needing to protect some part of themselves, maybe their hearts, maybe their souls, maybe their sexuality. So this conversation about grief, to me, is, I'm as impassioned about it because we miss too many things in this conversation that we're afraid to have.
Yeah, I would imagine for so many people. I was just, listening and thinking about, how do I deal with grief, and am I willing to talk about it? Now, luckily or unluckily, I'm one of these guys. I don't talk about anything. I don't have a whole lot of shame to many things. But I believe that's probably a hard thing for a lot of people, and not just men. I mean, not just men. It's hard to face trauma. It's hard to face grief, because the vulnerability there is that once you face it, then what?
And that's right.
What do I do with this? Okay, so
Right.
I've got this drama that's been bottled up inside, and I faced it, but so what?
Okay, so Rex, I just want to, for a moment, I want to just shift it from I faced it to, a lot of times when those memories start to come up, it's not a choice.
No, I understand.
Okay, and I'm not so sure that we're facing anything, but it's kind of, I have this magnet on my refrigerator, and and it's a pirate's chest, and when you press this button, there's a knock, 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 and then there's a let me out of here.
Okay.
And I see, really, like, trauma, physical, emotional, sexual, as it gets to a boiling point where that chest that you've been in, and it's been imprisoned by, it can't hold you anymore.
Right.
And you don't want it to hold you anymore.
Right.
And so when it starts to come out, sometimes it's a breath out, and sometimes it just bleeds through, and sometimes it's just a flood.
Okay.
And so and everyone is fractured by it in different ways, but the way that you hold it, the way that you dance with it, hopefully you get help for it.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of folks don't think that they can be helped. And so once again, we talk, unfortunately, about suicidal ideation. A medical term, it just means that you think about it a lot. Yeah. And maybe you begin to have a plan. And maybe you then begin to pack things up because you've got that plan, and you begin to say goodbye to folks. So that's one piece. But then maybe you start to drink, or you start to do drugs, or you start to use sex as an outlet, or you overwork, or you do excessive things, maybe exercise, or you control your food, or you're out of control with food. So it can come out all so many sideways.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to unpack. I had, like you, I had, mine wasn't sexual abuse, but as growing up, I had some physical abuse. And it took, I didn't really honestly embrace that and deal with it until I was in my mid 30s.
Yeah.
And when I had my own kids, and I was afraid to repeat some of those behaviors that had happened to me in the past when I was their age and stuff. And so, yeah, it's a very difficult thing to finally tackle those, embrace them, and work through them a lot.
Our kids can be our greatest teachers
That's for sure.
and make us face things that we never thought we would or could.
Now, we were talking off air a little bit about what's next. So if you could, what do you see on the horizon? So for you coming up here as you continue to be a leader in this thought leadership area?
So one of the pieces that I've been working on with three other colleagues who I met at a training called Heroic Public Speaking, which Michael and Amy Port are just wonderful, wonderful trainers of this, kind of technique of going out there and getting your voice out there. Okay. And so we created this pivot quest, and the idea that we come from four different perspectives, and what we want to start to do is have bigger conversations about pivoting and resilience and creativity and gratitude and risk. You were talking about risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And community. And so we all come from those perspectives with our own degree of expertise, and to really kind of take this on the road, maybe create like a summer boot camp, or we're in discussions about what that's going to look like. And actually, if any of your listening audience would like to go onto the website, thepivotquest.com,
Okay.
You can download the event that we just did April 9th. It was a 1-hour event. And when you sign up, yes, we will capture an email from you. However, what you'll get in return is a wonderful book that we created with two pages. We each created a 2-page exercises for anybody, and they're really, really great. So to really enhance the Pivot Quest, to enhance this public speaking, to get people talking about grief in a different way, in
Sure.
a way of living color rather than black, rather than, it's on one side or another side.
You touch on something it's a soapbox topic for me, and I talk to my kids about this all the time. I think we're pretty close in age, at least the same, within generations. And when our parents were in their careers, many people spent places 20, 30 years, 40 years employed someplace. And if it wasn't in one place, they still did the same job.
Yeah.
The ability to pivot in life now, I think, is one of the biggest skill sets someone can develop, because I look back over my 30 plus years in high tech, and you have to pivot all the time because things change so fast now. It really does. And so to be able to pivot and take something and not let it hold you down, like that grief or that trauma and those types of things, and not let it have you pinned to the mat so you can go on to your next thing. I just think it's one of the most important skills. I talk to my kids about it all the time. Don't be set on what you're doing today is what you're going to be doing for the next 30 years. It's unlikely.
It's so true,
unlikely.
Right?
Yeah. So interesting. Well, I want to have you back because I want to unpack a little bit. One of these guests that we could probably talk for hours about, but I know you've got some hard stops coming up to here shortly. So I am going to have you back. We're going to have another episode. So listen in, folks. There will be another one from Edy Nathan, part 2. But I want to ask the question so we can kind of get to a pause point here today. In this world, we all have this thing called a bucket list, things we want to do before our time's up here, and this dreams and aspirations and all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm kind of a physicist guy. I'm a science guy. So there's always an opposite to everything in the world. Okay, so where there's a yin, there's a yang. Well, where there's a bucket list, there's an opposite list. It rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I'm not going to say that. Okay. So It's a list of things that you'd never want to do. Okay. So you've been very transparent today, talked about all, your youth and your education, your background, influences, and all these things. What might be on Edy's effort list? Now, I'll give you a couple here so you can think right here. I'll never go back and do a Lakota sweat lodge. Not happening. Drumming, excessive chanting, excessive heat and humidity. No, not doing that again. Never. Sardines, no. So what might be on Edy's effort list? Just an item or two.
Yeah, I'll never jump out of a plane.
Okay, that's one.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Okay.
Nope, no way.
Anything,
no how.
Anything else that comes to mind?
I won't kill an animal willingly.
Okay. Willingly. Okay. That's fair enough. Those are great ones. Those are great. So I appreciate you coming on today, Edy. It's been fun.
I've had it was a great conversation, and thank you. Yeah, Rex. Thank you.
So until next time, I always have these things to say. Always keep your curiosity up. Be a lifetime learner. And so it makes things much more interesting and entertaining because there's so many things we can focus on these days that are so negative. And so I think we all need a little dose of curiosity each day. So until next time, we'll call this a wrap for this episode. And until next time, I would like to say what I always say is be safe, but yet be bold and make it a great day.